the best of Money Matters.
Market View on Money FM 89.3.
That's right, you're tuning in to Money FM 89.3. Time now for Market View with me, Chua Tian Tian, where we take you through how the Singapore stock market closed for the day, the biggest movers, sectors, and of course the companies to watch. But as always, a quick recap of some key movements. Singapore shares were little moved as Asian markets struggled for direction today. So if we look at the Straits Times Index, it nudged 0.04% higher to 4,299 points at about 2:36 p.m. Singapore time, and that's with a value turnover of some 911 million Sing dollars seen in the broader market. Now let's take you through the closing numbers. As we shared with you earlier, the STI closed slightly further in the green, up 0.12% at 4,302 points. In terms of value turnover, that's 1.42 billion Sing dollars. Gainers trailed losers 257 versus 306. Top advances for today we've got for you Prudential USD, Aces and DBS, and top decliners we have here Gemix USD, UOI and New Incorporation USD. Well, in terms of counters to watch, we do have Keppel Core because the infrastructure division of Keppel and Keppel Asia Infrastructure Fund announced today a joint divestment of their combined 80% interest in 800 super holdings. They also are from how Singapore's core and headline inflation slowed in August, contrary to expectations, to how Nvidia will invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI. We've got more economic and corporate headlines in focus. And joining me on the line today is Kelvin Wong, Senior Analyst at OANDA. Kelvin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Tian. Thank you for the invitation again.
Great to have you as always. And Kelvin, let's start with global news this time around. Nvidia will invest up to $100 billion or around 128 billion Sing dollars in OpenAI and also supply it with data center chips. This basically marks a tie-up between two of the highest profile players in the global AI race. What do you make of the news, and really what implications will this have on big techs and chip players respectively?
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a step back over here. Is that don't forget this part and parcel of the grand big strategy where the current U.S. White House administration that wish to embark to make U.S. a supremacy in terms of cutting-edge technology, especially in the arena of AI. So that's part and parcel of the Stargate project. So what's interesting over here is that Nvidia deal with OpenAI come on the backdrop of the very surprising $300 billion deal between Oracle and OpenAI as well. So what we could see over here is that there's this in short term, there will be this AI-driven productivity narrative that's going to have a positive feedback loop into the share price of U.S. semiconductor players. So net overall, it will be a rather reinforcement of this ongoing major and medium-term uptrend phase in this heavily centric S&P 500 that is heavily weighted to these mega technology stocks, and as well as the Nasdaq 100. And that also come on the backdrop of this newly kickstarted interest rate cut cycle by the Fed. But however, in the long term, investors got to bear in mind that this increases the risk of a potential AI bubble that is getting a bit faulty at this juncture. That means, i.e., the bar has been raised higher for OpenAI to actually develop their profit targets, given the fact that right now there are actually interplay between public listed companies like Nvidia and Oracle, putting out high hopes that OpenAI large language model will continue to see a high demand growth stretching into 2026 and 2027.
And Kelvin, going back to the Singapore stock market as usual, how did the STI fare today? And when it comes down to the biggest movers, any surprises there?
I would say that it's a rather positive session that we have for the STI. Why? Because for the last 7 sessions, since its fresh intraday high that was made on 5 days ago, this was 12th September, it managed to actually snap this 7 consecutive session of decline with a positive gain today at 0.12%. And this gain also came right at a key support level of 4,300 for the STI, which is also the rising 30-day moving average. So on top of that, we also do see various mix of leading component stocks for today, a mix of defensive and higher beta. So Seagram, we have the stellar performance come from Seagram, which is up by 3.85% due to a potential price target upgrade by a major investment bank. Mm-hmm. And also we have two defensive REITs, which also outperformed the STI today, which is Mapletree Logistic REITs up by 1.6%, and we have CapitaLand Ascenders REIT, which is up by 1.4%.
And Kelvin, if we zoom in on the counters to watch, we do have Keppel Coal because the infrastructure division of Keppel, as well as Keppel Asia Infrastructure Fund, they announced today a joint divestment of their combined 80% interest in 800 super holdings. I know you don't comment on individual firms, but generally speaking, how significant are such divestments if we look at the deal value here?
Yes, definitely this divestment is beneficial to Keppel as a whole by looking at how the share price performed today. So Keppel share price up close to 1%. We also outperformed the STI today as well. So if we look at from an investment perspective, so previously, Keppel Asia Infrastructure and Keppel brought over 800 super holdings back then. That was in 2022. Mm-hmm. So they paid for around 380 million for value for the 80% stake. So this divestment value is valued right now at around $600 million. So that's about gain about close to 60% gain, which is rather fantastic. So this consider this as a positive asset monetization, where potentially with this return, Keppel and as Keppel Infrastructure Fund will use these profits to actually reinvest in other potential target entities that is gel in line with their long-term strategic objectives.
And let's stay in Singapore, Kelvin. Singapore's core and headline inflation slowed in August, contrary to economists' expectations that both the core and the headline inflation prints would hold steady at July rates. Now, year-on-year core inflation in particular fell to its lowest level since February 2021. So if we look at the actual numbers, core inflation eased to 0.3% year-on-year in August. How far is this within your expectations, though? And what would the latest inflation print mean for officials on the monetary policy front?
Yes, if you look at, for me, it definitely came in line with my expectation. So given the fact that Singapore itself, we are put away that we are dependent on external growth. So this lowering of this inflation print to 0.5% year on year, that's a 4-year low, is actually in line with weakening of global demand as well. And do not forget over here that with this ongoing trade tariffs tension that is between US and the rest of the world, that actually also slow down global demand growth for Singapore. And also on top of that, we also see the weakening of oil prices. So oil prices right now, you look at WTI crude is trading around $60 per barrel. Mm-hmm. So that's down about $10 per barrel from 70 to 80 range mark about around a year ago. So that actually causes the core inflation to actually in Singapore to slip further to the downside. So now back to the story about MAS over here. So MAS I think got to actually gel right now with a stronger SING versus the continuous weakening of global demand. So if core inflation continues to dip further to a range about 0.2%, that's actually a risk of deflation in Singapore. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't actually gel well for Singapore economic growth. And on top of that, I think MAS also got to monitor the rather dynamic global tariff situation. So if US and China is able to strike a deal to lower tariffs further, potentially events to watch out for will be at the upcoming face-to-face meeting between the two countries' President Trump and President Xi in next month, next month, which is the end of October in the APEC sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. So if things turned out pretty rosy well from here, perhaps what MAS could do is to maintain status quo, not adjusting the senior band, and to actually look out for whether global demand will start to pick up from there.
And across the region, Kelvin, let's talk about Taipei and how it jumped more than 1% with chip titan TSMC soaring nearly 3%, tracking their Nvidia, which announced the investment in OpenAI. Otherwise, if we look at Asia as a whole, they drifted. We've got a holiday in Japan. We've got an approaching storm in Hong Kong. So what do you make of the movements in Asia as a whole today?
So for Asia, I still view it as generally positive. So overall, there's more positive than negative. So despite the fact that there's an outlier today on the negative side will be the Hong Kong stock market and the China stock market. So the Hong Kong stock market and the China stock market, there's profit-taking activities were seen, where the Hang Seng Index is down by negative 0.7%. But what's positive over here is that the benchmark China A-shares market, which comprises both the Shenzhen and Shanghai component stocks, initially at the start of the trading, in the trading session for today, they're actually down almost negative 1.4%. But by the end of today's closing session in the China stock market, the CSI 300 closed almost unchanged. So I still view that today's weakness in the Hang Seng Index and the China Asia market as more for profit-taking rather than the start of a pronounced medium-term downtrend. And also given the fact that if we start to see the U.S. Federal Reserve embarking this potential interest rate cut cycle going into 2026, where market participants are now looking at least 3 interest rate cuts to bring the Fed funds rate down to 2.75%. So that could also be beneficial to China and Hong Kong related stocks, given that they are positively related to a weaker U.S. dollar environment.
Now, further away, Kelvin, sources familiar with the matter said U.S. President Donald Trump will meet top Democratic leaders in Congress on Thursday to discuss government funding amid this looming shutdown ahead of a 30th September funding deadline. U.S. government shutdown there is. How far is this weighing on U.S. equity markets for the moment, or are investors pretty much unbothered about the news?
I would say that right now there is no material impact on the U.S. Stock market, given the fact that the current 30-year U.S. Treasury yield is still hovering below 5%. So market participants does not seem to be bothered by this brinkmanship. So if you know that midterms is coming in the U.S. next year, so definitely whatever party do not want to take the blame to actually cause the U.S. government to shut down. So very likely there could be potentially last-minute negotiation down to the wires to actually increase the debt ceiling to prevent a disastrous shutdown in the U.S. government. So market tends to look behind this brinkmanship. So at this moment in time, definitely I'm watching very closely the 30-year U.S. Treasury yield. So as long as this 30-year U.S. Treasury yield remains below that 5% level mark, or 5%/5.2% level mark, that could still allow the U.S. Major stock indices to actually bask in this potential bullish trend that is still intact.
Now, finally, before I let you go, Kelvin, gold prices climbed to a record high today, supporting by growing expectations of further U.S. rate cuts as well as a slightly weaker U.S. dollar. Now, that is as investors await Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech for additional policy insights. So if you look at spot gold at about 9:23 a.m., it was up 0.2% at $3,752 per ounce after hitting a record high of some $3,758 earlier in the session. So what are the levels to watch for the yellow metal then?
For now, I would say that the short to medium trend, uptrend for gold XAU/USD remains intact. So in fact, as we are speaking right now, they continue to add further gains. They're up now by close to 1% to a fresh all-time high at 3,782. So the next short-term resistance level to watch will be at 3,860, 3,890, followed by 3,940 with the key short-term support at 3,688 to maintain this ongoing minor bullish uptrend phase for gold.
I see. Lots to watch, and thanks so much for the insights today. Kelvin, that was Kelvin Wong, Senior Analyst at OANDA. Thank you so much for joining us right here on Money FM 89.3.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance.